As the PGA Tour season winds down, we can't help but look back on what was truly an incredible season of professional golf. We had some historic wins and some groundbreaking moments, but now we wonder who's going to win Player of the Year award. It may be obvious, but there may be a few things we actually got to look at to see who's going to get votes. We're going to talk about that here coming up on Golf with Mitch. All right, FedEx Cup Fall is winding down. We got 2 stops left, but been reflecting a lot on what we've seen this year in professional golf, and there have been some really cool storylines throughout this entire PGA Tour season. One person I want to talk about is Ben Griffin. He is one of 3 people who has had 3 or more wins on tour. So he got his 3rd win here in the fall, and he joined Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy. Scottie had more; he had 6 wins this season, but those are the only 3 players that had 3 or more wins, and those were Ben Griffin's first 3 wins. So he's been on tour for a while. It wasn't necessarily his rookie season, anything like that, and he had truly a breakout year. But the 2 people I kind of want to focus on here are Scottie and Rory, because they are obviously the ones who had the more impressive seasons this past year in 2025. Now, to talk about the Player of the Year award, if you are unaware, it's the Jack Nicklaus award, and the way that that gets awarded is based on a voting system of PGA Tour players. And so if you've played in, let's see, I got to confirm here. If you played in at least 15 events on tour, then you can vote for the Jack Nicklaus award. So those guys are the ones voting. Now, it's interesting because they're your peers. Makes you think of Survivor almost with the voting system, and it matters to the players, or it makes you wonder what matters to the players. Like in Survivor, for example, every season's different because you have different cast, and some people value gameplay and strategy more than physical strength in challenges or things like that. With the PGA Tour, to draw that comparison, it's a little different because you usually have the same cast of characters every season, and these players have relationships with Scottie and Rory, the ones who I imagine are the 2 up for debate. Now, I think Scottie's going to win the award. I don't think it's a question, but going along that theory of what the players value, there's a few different ways to look at it. So we're going to look at the stats first from this past season. So we'll put them up here side by side, but starting with just overall wins this year, Scottie had 6, Rory had 3. Pretty drastic difference. Top 10 finishes, Scottie had 17, Rory had 8. Scoring average, or excuse me, not scoring average. FedEx Cup points, Scottie got first with FedEx Cup points, and Rory got second. Now, Scottie didn't win the FedEx Cup because of how that playoff system works. Tommy Fleetwood was the one who ended up winning the last event of the year, so he's the one who won that. But for the season-long points race, Scottie had the most points by far, almost double what Rory had, and Rory was second place. Overall earnings, on-course earnings, Scottie was $27.6 million. Rory was $16.9 million. And now look at one of the big things, in my mind at least, is major wins. So Scottie had 2. He won the PGA Championship and won the US Open. Rory won the Masters. Now, if you just look at these side by side, it's obvious. It's Scottie. I think that's why Scottie's going to win. But, or when I say win, get the most votes, earn the award. The reason why I think Rory is in the conversation is because the storylines associated with his wins. He didn't play in as many events. He took a lot more time off. Mostly, I would think, from the Masters hangover, right? He has been on a major drought. He hasn't won a major event in 11 years. And he goes on to win the Masters, which was the only major that he has not won. So he completed his career Grand Slam, something that he's been very vocal about, that is one of the biggest things that he cares about in his career. One of the biggest stories, it was one of the most incredible finishes, final round. He had multiple double bogeys at the Masters, and he still was able to pull it off. Statistically speaking, that just doesn't happen. Very, very rare. I think one of the other situations where that happened was Jon Rahm, who had a double bogey, and it was on one of his very first holes of the tournament. Now, he obviously was able to recover from that. Statistically, I look at that a little more as an outlier, not just because it was so early in the event. But if you look at Rory's double bogeys, they were in very important moments of the tournament. It was down the stretch. He had multiple double bogeys and was still able to close the event, end his major tournament drought, and close his career Grand Slam. Now, again, the storyline of that is incredible, is historic, of being one of the few people who have won all 4 major tournaments. The other part of that is the Ryder Cup. Now, his career bucket list that he has been very vocal about is winning the Masters. Of course, that's to complete his Grand Slam. It's been 11 years that he's been talking about this because that's the last one that he's had. But to have that career Grand Slam, so to win the Masters, to finish that, as well as to win an away Ryder Cup, which it was a team event, so there were a lot of people who were involved in that, but he was a very important part in that as well, at winning at Bethpage. They dominated. It kind of got close down the stretch on Sunday. The Americans were pulling back a little bit, but they were able to retain the cup in a very hostile environment in New York at Bethpage Black. Those are the 2 things he's been very vocal about, and he completed both those within the same year. Now, the storyline is what makes that interesting. If you are into the theatrics of sports, that is career defining. I mean, Rory's already historically one of the greatest of all time, but having a year like this truly solidifies his name in the record books. And so how are players gonna weight that in their decision-making process when voting for the Player of the Year, for the Jack Nicklaus Award? The other thought process of that is with the Ryder Cup, he is on Team Europe. A lot of the players who are going to be voting are Americans. Are they going to value that win, that Ryder Cup win, as part of his season-long accolades when voting for the Jack Nicklaus Award? I don't know. That could be something that some of the players, at least on Team USA, may be a little bitter about and may not carry as much weight in their mind, or the opposite. They may look at that as being even more impressive, being there and part of the event. They may say, man, Rory really killed it with that. Granted, if that's the case, those are all Scottie Scheffler's teammates as well, and they saw him play poorly in that event. Now, if we go back to the stats, it's obvious Scottie has statistically had a much better year. He's won 2 of the 4 majors this season, and as well as had double the wins of Rory, which is huge difference, right? If you look statistically, even the top 10 finishes, 17 versus 8. Now, that also goes back to the question of, did Rory withdraw from a lot more events because he was celebrating his Masters win? Maybe he was able to pick and choose which events he wanted to be in more, and just doesn't play in the events that he doesn't care about anymore. He's a lot further along in his career where he doesn't have to play in every single event. So it'll be interesting to see when these players vote for the Jack Nicklaus Award to see who is going to come out on top. Again, if it were me, I would bet that it's going to be Scottie, but who knows? There may be people who value the storylines of this career-long chase that all kind of came together in this one season for Rory. So that's all I want to talk about today. Keep in mind, we got the second to last tournament of the FedEx Cup Fall, so let's look out for those bubble players like the Joel Damons. Joel Damon's still sitting at 111th, As this episode comes out, they'll be in their first round of that event. So he's got to have a really good 2 weeks in order to jump to that 100 or better spot to lock in his full status for 2026. So keep an eye on him and some of those other bubble players. Thanks for tuning in. We'll chat more tomorrow.